All right, we're back. It's another edition of Colts Corner with myself, Kevin Bowen. The Colts AFC South hopes are gone. Playoff hopes on life support, and we recap what was an ugly one, certainly in prime time last night, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And boys, my hand raised. I didn't think Phillip Rivers had that in him. Unfortunately, it is marred in what was a 21-point loss on Monday Night Football. Certainly smooth, safe travels to everybody out there this time of year. I know it's busy, and appreciate you spending time with the podcast. This will be it for the week. We'll come back next week, recap Colts and Jags, and get you set for whatever Week 18 is going to look like. We'll go over what I liked, what I didn't like today, some playoff scenarios as well. So we'll do that here on the podcast. Let's again, it's kind of a little bit of where we're at last week of you're recapping two movies, and the Rivers movie took even, a different turn, I'd say in a positive direction, certainly, from last night. But the big picture is what gets so much focus this time of year, and the big picture is now 5 straight losses, 6 of 7, AFC South elimination, 11 straight years of it. And I think what too is bothersome about that is, last year you were eliminated from the South with 3 games to go. This year you're eliminated from it with 2 games to go. It's not even like you're back at 2023 where you get it to Week 18 or even Week 17 to potentially, put some pressure into that final divisional game in the final week of the season. To me, I think that's just a little element that would also be additionally bothersome. If I were evaluating this operation. And then big picture, too, just the financial component. Anybody that watches Monday Night Football, it's been a while since the Colts have been on it. I mean, it is an unbelievable just marketing night for your city, for your franchise, all of it. And I think there's a financial component that, if anybody watched the first hour of the pregame coverage, you got more Colts love than you got 49ers love. Cam Bynum's getting a one-on-one interview on the field, and Nick Cross getting highlighted. Great piece on the cheerleader Morgan and her sign language relationship, I guess, with a young boy named Mark. Just some awesome, awesome coverage for your team and for your franchise. And then, you go out and lay that egg, and it's probably a reminder to a lot of those TV markets of why they don't put the Colts into prime time very often. And, what we're used to, unfortunately, here recently is the Colts lose these games. And they lose them in, rather embarrassing fashion. This isn't, Taylor Heineke or Jake Browning or Drew Lock, but, to make the 49ers look like that is ugly. I thought so much of the game, and we'll get into what I liked, what I didn't like, really turned on the Amir Abdullah kick return fumble, and you just didn't create the blueprint that you had at all the previous week in Seattle. So a lot to get to. We'll get some Twitter questions. It'll just be me today on the podcast if you couldn't find that out already here. But we'll get back with me and Eddie hopefully coming up next Monday. Just an abomination of a defensive effort. And that's where I'll start and what I didn't like the most. It just awful. Go over the drives. Touchdown, field goal. The only thing that stopped the 49ers all night was a crossbar. A touchdown, field goal, touchdown. And then you finally got the interception there real late off Kendrick Bourne's hands. So, all the numbers point to it. The one hit on Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey getting to a yards per carry number that he hasn't really sniffed this season or certainly done it very often. The fact that you didn't get them into a third down until the third drive of the game, I don't know if I've ever really seen that. And, 2 plays in the second half, I thought just kind of was the cherry on top for me. You get your ass kicked in the first half, you give up 24 points, and then and Kittle just smoked you in the first half. In the very first play coming out of the third quarter, right to Kittle. To me, that is an anybody but 85. Then later, you get into that third and goal. I think it was from the 9 there in the fourth quarter. And, again, you're going to have plays against a guy like Christian McCaffrey where he just is better than you. He puts his foot in the ground, and he moves differently than Zaire Franklin or Jermaine Pratt. That is what makes Christian McCaffrey certainly one of the more unique players. I said on last week's podcast, he's one of the probably the most gifted runner, mover, however you want to describe him, that I've ever seen. And to get into a third and goal from the 9 and for the breakdown in coverage to let him walk into the end zone. Again, nothing he did athletically on that play. That was Canton, Ohio. And yet he just waltzed in the end zone on a 3rd and goal from the 9. Like, you got to work hard to score a touchdown from that down and distance. And for him to get in the end zone that easily, those 2 plays in the second half I thought was just the cherry on top. Sure, one hit all game long, and you got a healthy front 7. There's so much invested. Purdy he patted that ball all night long. So just horrific from your defense. And again, that's a healthy front 7. It's Buckner back in the lineup. I get your down corners, but that's it really when you look at the injuries. And to allow, whatever it was, 41. If they wanted more, they probably could have scored more there at the end. Just absolutely horrific day. And we're just kind of used to this. The Colts defense allowing Purdy threw the most touchdowns 49ers quarterback has had in 25-some years, or maybe it was longer than that. Maybe it was 35 years. It just, that stuff happens, I feel like, so often against the Colts. Yeah. Just awful from your defense. The other thing I didn't like, again, going back to the Abdullah fumble, I don't know if you guys felt this, but that felt like a 10, 14-point turnover. And I jotted that down at the time. I wanted to make sure that, you don't just get, prisoner of the, hey, how did the game unfold from there, and then you react to the turnover. No. In time, I thought to myself, oh, no. Because, now part of it was probably because what Rivers was doing offensively I didn't think was sustainable. Now, granted, the offense, again, hand raised. I was wrong on Phillip Rivers and his ability to at least do a little bit more down the field than I thought. And, at the end of the day, you scored 27 offensively. I guess if you take away the pick 6, you scored 20, net 20 offensively there. That still is a fine number, especially against a team in San Francisco that wasn't putting up just insane point totals this season. But, in taking the ball, I think Steichen's thought there is we need to play from ahead. And I get that. Given your offensive makeup, given the offensive line injuries, I understand why he's doing that. I know a lot of people are bothered by it, but I get that thought. And to have the punch out right when it was 7-7, and now they're up 14-7. And I get the Colts answered, but I just felt like it created an immense amount of pressure. And really just a pathetic night for your special teams, kick coverage and kick return. Penalties galore. You get the life there late with the Tyler Goodson return, and that gets whistled back for a couple penalties. Outside of Groupie doing his thing, I thought that Abdullah play was just huge. And you're just not in a position to do that. And your blueprint, again, defensively, kick coverage, kick return, also was just a big, big problem for you. I'd say the last thing I didn't like, so much of it is just I could have said the defense and probably moved on. Again, I know your offense had a nice night, but to only have 2.9 yards per carry with Taylor, when you had a little bit of that offensive lull there, and just right now you aren't, and you can't be in a position where you have to have Rivers drop back the amount that he's doing, because sooner or later, C.J. West is going to get to him, and he's going to have some moments where he's 44 years old in a pocket, and he's not going to be able to, hit guys all night long. And I think you saw that over the course of 48 minutes, or over the course of 60 minutes. But damn, 2.9 yards per carry for Taylor is just it's a season low. And we hinted at this on the podcast. I expected some musical chairs in the offensive line, and they really gave you musical chairs. I didn't totally understand that, to be honest with you. I just assumed they would keep it how they ended the Seattle game, Luke Tenuta for Bernard Ryman, and for the most part, you keep 4 positions intact. Instead, they bumped Dalton Tucker in there, and then they moved Gonzalez over, and obviously you lose Bortolini. I'm not talking about Bortolini, when you lost him in the second play of the game, but you get a red zone hold on Tucker, you get a false start on Gonzalez. I want to say Travis maybe had an illegal formation. Those were, again, big penalties from, an offense right now that it's just hard to consistently create the chunks that are out there. So, that was definitely something that I did not like. Jonathan Taylor, 2.9 yards per carry. Shifting gears to what I liked, again, you got to go to Rivers. And first off, for those that didn't watch the TV copy, I thought ESPN did a wonderful job and just letting that breathe. Side note, we had Joe Buck on our fan morning show on Monday. I really enjoyed that convo. If you're an IU fan, I think you'll extra enjoy that. That's up on our podcast page, the fan morning show here on 107.5 The Fan. But, ESPN just really laid out when Rivers got to the line of scrimmage. And the Colts had this approach. We're going to go tempo. We're going to get to the line with 30 seconds to go on the play clock, and we're going to let him dissect it. And here in Indy, we've got the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, and Jack Everly's the maestro of it, and Phillip Rivers was Jack Everly. He got that line of scrimmage, and he just dissected it. And that's how we're going to throw with anticipation. That's how we're going to create advantages. It largely worked. And I was highly skeptical of would there be more downfield stuff. And, I don't want to act like they obviously were hitting go balls. I mean, certainly some definite underthrown go balls or deep balls, however you want to classify them, to Pittman and Downs. And, even Pierce, you were bailed out on one of them there with a flag. But, one thing I thought Rivers did such a great job early on is you got into some bad 3rd and longs, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12. And his ability to throw a wounded duck on the right shoulder seemingly every time is absurd. And again, I'm not saying right shoulder like right or left. I'm saying the shoulder that allows that guy to make a play after the catch. Taylor, catch and run on the 3rd and 8. Downs, catch and a little bit of run on the 3rd and long as well. And then, boom, he gets the offsides penalty. He takes a shot to Pierce. And honestly, we'll see how the Rivers experience goes. I fully expect him to start, by the way, on Sunday. Short week. Technically, you can't be eliminated till, 8 p.m. on Saturday if you are. So you got to prep, obviously, like you're not. So I fully expect him to be the starter. The throw I'll probably remember the most is the 3rd and goal from the 16 on that next drive. For so many teams out there, that's a give-up play. 3rd and goal from the 16, no. You just check it down, you try to, whatever. Maybe if you get it down to 3 or the 2, you entertain going for it. But that's a give-up play. And for him to throw with that anticipation before Pierce makes his break, it was so, to quote Rivers, it was so stinking good. That thing ain't the tightest spiral in the world, but man, that is in a window. It is in the bucket right there. So, he got Downs involved a little bit more. He hung in there in the 4th. He delivered one to Warren on that touchdown drive. I thought was really impressive too. And, obviously it wasn't perfect. Again, I think I'm allowed to quote my wife because she's delivered 3 children, but she has said in watching Phillip Rivers, it's like watching someone 6 weeks postpartum try to operate back there. I think that's a fair quote, and I think she's fine with me going with a direct quote on that. But, of course, the final INT, puts a little bit of a damper on it. But the Rivers experience, and I think if I'm grading him as an NFL quarterback, was largely pretty darn good last night, especially down 3 significant offensive linemen. And I'm trying to remove the 44-year-old grade. Obviously, when you throw that factor in, it's like, holy shit. I mean, this thing it's incredible. But this is where you get torn on it. And I don't know if you guys caught the Monday Night Countdown, but Troy Aikman gives him the Hemi Award. And Rivers half joked, I think I'm the first person ever getting an award after throwing for 120 yards and a loss. And, that's where we're at right now. It's the Rivers thing is cool, wild, and you could argue has been, certainly more effective than I thought it would be. But it's 5 straight losses. It's 6 of 7. It's looking at a historic collapse. It's 11 years without a home playoff game. And that's what I'm going to keep on coming back to that. We got a lot of big picture questions coming up in Twitter time, so maybe I'll hold off for that. But that part of it, I mean, think about just if you live in the indie sports bubble, think about the success those teams, collegiately, professionally, have had since the Colts last hosted a home playoff game. All of them, even the programs that you would say have struggled, like Purdue football. Purdue football has played a Big Ten title game inside of Lucas Oil Stadium in the last, 5 years. Indiana basketball has won, multiple tournament games in the last 10 years. And yet you haven't hosted a division that's not Allen, not Mahomes, not Lamar Jackson. And again, this year, 2 years removed, or 2 weeks removed from it. Last year, 3 weeks removed from it. The other thing I liked was Pierce. Just, again, he continues to cash in. Good things happen when you target Alec Pierce. You guys have heard me say it a million times. I'll continue to say it a million times. And, financially, I think some things have opened up with the Jones injury on, could you potentially tap into that a little bit more, whether it's franchise tag, whether it is, just more money, period, on a long-term deal. I think those are all things to potentially explore there. So shout out to Alec Pierce. Good things happen. You target him. Smart by Rivers to get him going. And those catches, those are tight, tough window, crowded, 50-50 type of balls, and he always comes down with them. Always comes down with them. All right, let's get to Twitter questions. This one from Joel. He goes, I saw a stat that the Colts defense is the third most expensive in the league. At this point, I don't even blame Chris Ballard anymore for the situation we are in. I actually blame Carly Gordon for this one. Hindsight's 2020, but the more I thought about the Sauce Gardner trade, the more I wonder why she would green light it. Mortgages your next 2 first-rounders to a guy that should have been fired 2 years ago if Jim Irsay was in better health. The return on investment or lack thereof for the defense, pass rush, lack of help at the linebacker position, those alone are fireable offenses, yet it seems that Ballard is not even on the hot seat. If Carly give him a thumbs up for the trade, please help it make sense. Yeah, there's a lot to get to here. I will say one thing from last night that has me curious is this. There are a lot of core beliefs that Jim Irsay possessed that their daughters want to continue. There are obviously some things they will do differently. But one of the most constant things that was there for Jim Irsay, that bothered him was when his team got embarrassed in primetime. He knows those opportunities are precious. So to get them, you got to take advantage of them. And to get embarrassed in primetime was something that really bothered him. And again, it probably bothers you as much optically as it potentially bothers you financially when you're running the show and what the franchise, what being in the spotlight gives you and, all of those things. And so I am curious that part of it. Again, I don't know what Carly Gordon's going to do. And, obviously I've said I don't get the impression that change is imminent, but or at least those in the powers that be, I should say, feel nervous about it. And the Sauce trade has been a big, point of all of this. But what in the embarrassment last night was not trotting out a 44-year-old quarterback. The embarrassment last night was where Chris Ballard is richly invested. I mean, I've gone over it a million times. There's no position group I think he cares about more that you've gotten less return on investment in than the defensive line. I mean, that to me is such a damning element. You could point to, lack of division titles, lack of playoff appearances, lack of playoff wins. All that probably speaks for itself. But again, in the blueprint that Chris Ballard handed the Irsay family 9 years ago, the D-line was a huge emphasis. And, you've got first, second, third-round picks galore in there. You've got money galore in there. And no matter the defensive coordinator, I would say time and time again, it is underperformed. Now, on the Sauce trade, I'm trying not to be hindsight's 2020. But, at the time, I think I probably paid a little bit more A.D. Mitchell element to it than maybe some were. And, just kind of break the trade down a little further. And if you put players to the draft picks, what you basically said is we're trading, let's call it 4 players. Let's say that you traded back once. You're trading 4 top 50 picks for 1 player. So that obviously is a big trade on paper when you look at it from that side of it. But also there was major quarterback confirmation after just 2 months. And you also were sitting here saying our regime has earned the right for us to execute this. So, it's Sauce is great, but it's also Carly Gordon saying, well, Daniel Jones is great, and he's a foundational piece, and he's going to stay healthy, and injury history has never been there for him. And we have the right GM. We have the right head coach. And I don't know, maybe Carly lost sight of that and, what it really meant. Maybe she realized what the trade meant and still signed off on it, which probably brings a little bit more scaredness to it, but I think we did provide proper context when the trade occurred. There is a large amount of risk in this. A large amount. And I understand the time frame, and trades like this are not possible every single day of an NFL season or certainly an NFL offseason, but it was quite the chips in move at a point in time where there are other franchises around the league that I think could have pulled that off, i.e., you have a more established quarterback, either injury history-wise or contractually, your GM and your head coach have more on their resume. They've earned the right for us to do this. Kind of removing yourself from the sauce element of the trade. I know some people were skeptical about, hey, is he truly, an all-pro, et cetera, et cetera. But even if you take that side of it out and just kind of stuck to what the trade said otherwise, it's a lot. All right, Jacob, Tanner, Trent. We got a million people asking about changes. Basically, the question I got down here is, do you think there will or should be significant changes to staff or roster in the offseason? Recently, the Colts have routinely underperformed year in and year out, and nothing changes. Do you think new ownership will be different, or is this just the new norm for the franchise? Again, is this the most egregious? And let's just focus on Ballard because his sample size is bigger. Is this the most egregious of the 9 years? No. But it's 9. And to me, the only reasons that I pause when I hear, hey, they should be brought back is because injuries and because you don't have 2 first-round picks. And I'm not sure if that's valid enough in my opinion. I don't think it is, I guess, to be frank. First off, tell injuries to the 49ers. And right now, are there other AFC teams that are sitting there outside of the postseason that are going to say, hey, our hands raised, injuries for us, and we'll be back next year? You don't think Kansas City's saying that? You don't think Cincinnati's saying that? You don't think Baltimore's saying that? And the Colts have obviously had some very notable injuries here over the last month plus. I don't want to ignore that. But there's also been, good injury health. I mean, Jonathan Taylor hasn't been touched all year from an injury standpoint. Your offensive line, until the last couple weeks, they were, 13 games into the season without hardly anything. Your pass-catching group, totally healthy throughout there. I was very nervous about linebacker and safety depth, and you've been very healthy at both of those 2 spots. So it's not like you've just been ransacked with injuries all over here. Is there context with it, and should it deserve some mention? Yeah. I'm not going to ignore that. I'm not going to sweep it under the rug. But for me to say that means that everyone gets to run it back, I don't understand that aspect at all. And, if you want to go off of Ballard's words, what did he say last year at the season-ending press conference? We have to find a way to win end-of-the-season games more often. Well, look what's happening right now. And then 2, he said it. Close is getting to the Super Bowl. Last play of the Super Bowl. Going 8-9 is not close. Well, if you're a betting man right now, you'd probably say 8, maybe 9. Well, there you go. So, what do I think they should do? Steichen is the one that, if you graded Steichen on last night, and this is what makes it so difficult when you are the head coach and the play caller. As the OC and the play caller, Steichen was borderline brilliant last night, given what he had available to him. Borderline brilliant. But then as a head coach, here's his team, once again in the month of December, not ready to meet the moment. And that's happened far too often in his 3 years. So, I largely believe you tie everybody at the hip. I do. There's a part of me that's like, would you hire the GM and let that person evaluate everything? I don't love that. I know San Francisco is one of the rare cases where, they brought in the GM post-head coach and it's worked out. But again, that's me, in my opinion. What's going to happen? I'm not holding my breath for it. I'm not. And maybe I'm numb to how the franchise is operated, and I should give more credence to Carly Ursay-Gordon being new. But the Sauce Gardner trade, right? She signed off on it. Did she not, maybe fully understand all the parameters that were involved in that? I don't know. Colton asks about Michael Pittman Jr. playing out the rest of his contract, or would you try and get rid of him this offseason? He's been a great Colt, but cap space is starting to get tight. We could pay a receiver a fraction of what he makes to do the same thing, and Pierce has shown he can take the next step if we re-sign him. Well, certainly you'd have to go out and find another wideout. I mean, right now it'd be what, Pearson Downs? That's the other thing with trading Mitchell, of course. That thought of him potentially taking the torch, even if obviously clear growth was needed, that you would have that element to it. And I can hear people say, well, nowadays you just draft a wideout every year. Well, again, you don't have your first-round pick. So if you're saying, hey, one of the day 2 picks is going to wideout, then all of a sudden what? That means one pick in the first 3 rounds is going somewhere else. You don't think the pass rush could use a jolt? You don't think this team could use a corner? You don't think this team could use a defensive playmaker, period, probably is the better way to put it? Maybe even a linebacker. So, yeah, I mean, would you tell Pittman he's got to play it out? I don't know. I don't think his season has all of a sudden meant, hey, man, here's your 3rd contract with us. And that's come from a guy that probably likes Pittman, more than most here. But that's probably how I would view where things are at right now. Again, Mitchell probably throws things a little bit differently into the mix here. Isaac, in this losing streak, we haven't seen any complimentary football. It stems from our culture of mediocrity. How do we enhance the mental grit of this team? Isaac, I mean, very fair. And you're right, this has largely been the same core. And that's where I would struggle to do the run it back. Like, earn the right to run it back. I struggle to find evidence of why. Why? I mean, we're talking 2nd, 3rd contract guys. I mean, I think we said this kind of at the time of even the 7-1 start. And then, yes, injuries played into it, but like the schedule was largely heavily in your favor to start the season. Does it totally derail to the point that it has so far? But, I mean, again, you're eliminated from the AFC South with 2 weeks to go. Maybe you just would have been eliminated from the AFC South with 1 week to go. Or, if you want to get technical, Daniel Jones, by the time he tore his Achilles, you were out of the playoffs. And sure, was he playing through a leg injury? Yeah, but, I mean, there's a little bit of life of, like, that's the NFL. And unfortunately, that's Daniel Jones's career. And I don't think that can be ignored either. That's unfortunate, but I don't think that can be ignored either. So, anytime you get this question, culture, all that, like, it's hard to put a finger on that type of stuff, but the results are the results. And, you've been a team that has been outside looking in. I mean, what's the playoff? If the playoff drought does continue, what is it? Let's assume, I guess, Panthers win the South. It'd be Jets, Falcons, Saints, you? Is that right? Colts are the 4th longest playoff drought in the NFL right now, if it gets to 5. I got to go over playoff scenarios to end the podcast. I can't get myself to go there until that. Tyler wanted to ask about Jalen Travis, small sample size. What do you think of his performance at right tackle? Yeah, I didn't really get the musical chairs. I like Travis at right tackle for the most part. I think that's a pass the torch spot. When you get into the Pittman question, the finances question, I do think that's where you go with that. I think that kind of makes sense from a how do you handle the future on the offensive line. That's where I would go with that. Okay, Colts playoff chances. I think I have this right. I don't know if it's gospel, but I believe I'll try to make this as simple as it sounds. Okay, again, AFC South you're eliminated from. So the wild card, the 7 seed, the only thing you can get. In order to get that, you have to have 3 games go your way. Before we get into any sort of tiebreakers, you have to have 3 games go your way. Those 3 games. Go Chargers. Was that a good Schwarzenegger? I believe it's Go Chargers, go. I felt like that was one of my better ones. Chargers over Texans Saturday at 4:30. That's what you need right there. If you don't get that, it's over. It's over before you kick off on Sunday. Now, do I think they'd all of a sudden say, hey, Riley Leonard, go in the game? And by the way, I continue to say I don't think Anthony Richardson will play for the Colts this season. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe week 18 something changes if they're eliminated, but that's where I'll go. The 3 games. Chargers over Texans, Colts over Jags, and then Week 18, you'll need the Colts to go to Houston and win. You need all three of those games. If you get all three of those, that means the Texans are 10-7, the Colts are 10-7. And therefore, we go to head-to-head tiebreaker. They split. We go to divisional record. I believe both would be 4-2 in the division. We go to conference record. I believe they both would have the same conference record. We go to common opponents. They both would have the same record against that. So we go to strength of victory. I feel like it's the BCS. Hell, if the BCS could have got Notre Dame in this year, I'm all for the BCS coming back. Strength of victory. And I think it means, I guess, what it sounds like. You want to cheer for the teams that the Colts beat and the teams that the Texans didn't beat. So, for example, you want the Dolphins to win their last couple of games. You want the Broncos to win their last couple of games. You want the Falcons to win their last couple of games. And then on the reverse of it, you don't want the Chiefs to win. The Texans beat the Chiefs. You don't want the 49ers to win. You don't want the Ravens to win. You don't want the Bills to win. Those are the teams that the Texans did beat. So I think right now, I kind of forget, it's a slight edge. I want to say the Texans may have a slight edge right now. But there's a lot of shifting that can happen with those opponents. So again, before that even gets entertained, 3 games have got to go your way. And then you get a strength of victory at that point. So I think that clears it up. I don't know. Part of me doesn't even want to go there, but who knows? They're still alive. All right, everybody have a great Christmas. Safe travels. We'll talk to you Monday, recapping Colts and Jags. Later.